Welcome back to the Titanium Hangar, and welcome to Retro Wednesday. And today I want to talk to you about collecting vintage in 2023. There's pluses and minuses. Obviously, we've been on a roller coaster ride from 2020, 2021, 2022. We're coming down off of it, but things have changed. The landscape does not look the same as 2019, but in some cases it looks better, some cases it looks worse. Today I'm going to talk to you about the pluses and minuses, the good and bad to collecting. I'm going to be showing some pictures of my collection, old pictures, because I have a new collection update video coming very soon, and I also usually showcase collections and individual reviews of figures, vehicles, and those kinds of things on Retro Wednesday. But today is a discussion. I've got a lot more discussions to be had, but let's talk about this one. Collecting in 2023, good and bad, coming up. So the first good, I'm always going to start with the good, of course, and the first one is nostalgia. Nostalgia is why we collect this in the first place, and the most powerful thing that you hear any collector say is, I had that when I was a kid. That is the nostalgia, getting your hands on these things again 30, 40 years later. There is something to be said about getting to handle those figures again, starting to collect those, put them on a shelf, and enjoy them in a physical representation. One of the things that I realized when I was collecting again in 1996 was actually how small the figures were. Even the larger figures just felt much larger than they really were. They're a lot smaller. Even the 6-inch toys from back in the day don't really feel that big when you're an adult. The other thing about collecting vintage in 2023, we're not getting any younger. So if you want to collect and you keep sitting on the sidelines and going, I'd like to get a collection of that, I'd like to get some Dune figures in there, well, now's the time. And actually, now's time for a lot of good reasons that we're about to discuss, but it's something that it's either now or never, or those kinds of things. But I do want to point out that yeah, we're not getting any younger. Definitely not me. But we're not getting older. We're just getting better, right? We're just getting better. So with that, collecting all this stuff, reliving your youth. So you get to relive a more simple time. It's a simpler time, a more simple time from back in the day, in the past. And I have to admit, 80s were great. 90s were just too serious for me, but they were still kind of fun. But most of the people collect 70s, 80s, 90s when they consider it vintage. The early 2000s are starting to cross slightly into vintage, but I still view 1995 as a cutoff, for me personally, for vintage. Okay, so the next good point is that common stuff has got cheaper, a better value on the common stuff. Now, there's a lot of reasons why. First of all, that rush of collecting in 2020 that we had, people went after the things that they had back in the day, which for the most part was common stuff. And that stuff actually all skyrocketed for a while. Now it's settling back down. And when it comes to G.I. Joe, there's literally 10 times more stuff for pretty much everything in this picture available on eBay now than there was in 2020. Because I checked. And with that, sometimes there's maybe 9%, 9 times more, 8 times more. But for the most part, pretty much everything in this picture is readily available, easy to get, easy to acquire, but was not so easy back in 2020. So it's getting easier for the more common stuff. So why is it easier to get this common stuff? It's because people have to go back to work. So people are back to work, back to the normal lives, the grind that's out there. So that's definitely a big reason that not just the common stuff, but pretty much everything, for the most part, is getting a little bit easier to acquire, except for the extra rare stuff. That's in the negatives section. But people got to get back to work, and they're not focusing on collecting. Other people have different priorities, so their priorities are not the same as they were in 2020. Their priorities now shift. So a shift in priorities and a shift away from prioritizing collecting. Again, I'm using old pictures. It's funny to me, too, to use this old batch of pictures because my collection right now looks so much different, but I'm not slowing down any. In fact, I am doubling up because of the fact that so much stuff is so much cheaper and more readily available. So the next reason that this stuff is becoming more readily available and it's more common and easier to find, even common stuff, is because of the 2 times a year. Right now we're in the middle of summer. We have something called summer doldrums, and we also have the December effect. So the summer doldrums, basically are the fact that people are out vacationing right now and they're doing other things, pulls their resources away from collecting, and also pulls their attention away from collecting. During a time you would think that during the summer people have more free time and all of that, they're actually focusing on other things, having fun, trying to get their money's worth out of their vacation. Most specifically, the last week in May, the first week or two in June are the most intense vacation weeks from what I've seen, but I will be doing a Disney vacation video very soon, and with that, I kind of understand the trends a little bit better when it comes to the summer doldrums, where you can find stuff a lot cheaper and a lot more readily available. December is also an interesting effect, and I just believe 2023 will follow the same recipe we've seen the last few years, maybe even more intense, is the fact that during those time frames, stuff doesn't sell as well when it's vintage and loose. Now, stuff may be sealed in the package, that might sell well, or new items that are in the package would sell well. But for the most part, if you're a vintage collector and you like loose stuff, then December is the best month. People are allocating their resources to Christmas and their family like they should, and not focusing so much on collecting. And of course, all of the festivities going along with Christmas, holidays, Thanksgiving, all of those time frames, those are always the best time to find the deals because people are focused on other things and not collecting. And so, yes, it does sound kind of sad. I'm at an eBay auction on Thanksgiving, but really at the end of the day, that's a minute out of your day is not a big deal. But those are the trends that I see. And with that, that's when you can score some good deals. Summertime doldrums, holiday doldrums. Okay, so the next reason that collecting in 2023 vintage figures is really a good thing, because there are so many checklists out there. There's lots of videos about reviews telling you what to look for when you're collecting this stuff. This stuff truly didn't exist back in the 90s when I started collecting. What you did get were price guides. There were some resources available, but nothing like today. Today, there are all of these resources. This one that you're looking at right now is Transformerland. There's a lot of great resources there. They have a lot of good stuff. One of my favorite one is the action figure checklist. These checklists from Figure Realm. That's one of the best places. I think they've done a really good job just being able to put together some checklists so you can keep an idea of what's going on. And it's really awesome to have that checklist, to go right down that checklist for collecting, or to see something that you never knew was made, which I've got to tell you, there's so much stuff I didn't know was made that I found out since 2020, and I'm highly impressed with these people putting out these amazing checklists. It's really fun, a really great resource, and sometimes you're saying, hey, I can't find that, it's unattainable, but that's okay. At least you can look at a picture. So the next reason that collecting in 2023 is so much fun to collect vintage is because, let's say you don't want to spend the money to track down the vintage. There's a lot of different retro series, Star Wars, we've got this, there's even some Transformers, and so there's knockoffs of Transformers, and then there's so many other options than just getting vintage, but to get something that is almost exactly the same through these retro series. And yes, some people say they're not as good, or some people say that these are actually better than the vintage stuff, but still, there's those options out there. And for card backs, which is actually going to be a negative, carded stuff, modern retro carded stuff to look like it's vintage for real cheap. And your Ollies are selling these for $4 right now. If you have an Ollie's, $4 each. So now we're going to get into the negatives of 2023. Negatives are because these rare items that are hard to get. Well, the first one, the rare items are expensive. They're not just more expensive, they're exponentially more expensive. We're not talking they're twice much or 3 times as much. They're probably 4 times, some cases 10 times. That is insane. So with that, this is the only thing I don't have from this toy line, the Shopper, Ghostbusters. I've heard of people picking these up, but I'm not spending $2,000 on this. I don't think it's worth anywhere near it. I think it's a $300 to $500 playset, and past that, I could just do without. But collecting in 2023, stuff like this is still astronomical. Even more than 2020 and 2021 and 2022. The rarest stuff, the hardest to find stuff, is even more expensive. Another good example of that is the Robotech SDF-1 playset, and I believe that's even what it's the correct way to say it, SDF-1 playset. I've never seen one of these in person, and the only couple I've seen for sale in the last 3 years sold for around $2,400. So with that, they're not even complete, not even in great shape, And when you start getting to these rare playsets, people want more for one part than like a USS flag. So I mean, it's just insane. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but more example, I can make more examples of this, like the Kraken from Titan, Clash of the Titans, and a few other things. So the next negative is that we're losing sellers. There are less people out there willing to sell toys, and there's a lot of reasons for that. There's a lot of very specific reasons. So the first reason is a slowdown in demand that helps us on one end, hurts us on the other. So it was in 2020, people that started selling in 2020 that weren't collecting all this time or buying or selling all this time, that would put stuff up for sale. They'd get hits on it in the first 15 minutes, have it sold in an hour. Then they could not put stuff up fast enough to sell. It was just selling out so fast. And as time went by, 2021 still carried that a bit. 2022 started to see the slowdown. 2023 screeching halted. And so a big part of that is less sellers because it's not as easy. It's getting back to normal reality setting in, and people really don't want to deal with the real market of selling. The fake market we saw in 2020 and a little bit carried in 2021, that was fun, I guess you could say, but now we're living in the real world. And this is notoriously the biggest reason that we're losing sellers, specifically the small sellers that sell less than 20,000 a year. We're not losing like Wheeljack's Lab or any of those bigger ones, Komoko Toys or whoever those are. The big ones that you see popping up with giant collections for sale all the time are still going to pop up with giant collections for sale all the time because they understand how to handle the tax returns, but the small people don't. Now, there was this bill that was introduced, the Destroy America bill or something. I don't know what they named it, something wrong, but it was the Destroy America bill that was introduced by this administration that we're in. And it took it from $20,000 down to $600,000. Now, the IRS is more powerful than the White House. They actually have more power. There's no limit to the IRS. And they pushed it back against the White House, and they told them that we are not going to institute your policy in 2022 for the 2022 tax year. Now, they are now saying that they feel it should just get repealed and go back. I've never seen the IRS do this, and they're not doing it for the small person. They're doing it because they just can't handle a quadruple workload for this to have zero impact. It's very little money is going to get generated. Just people and their frustration level is going to go through the roof. It will generate money, but not as much money as it costs to have 87,000 people manning this. So with that, I've actually heard so many people last year and already this year that say they refuse to ship anything because they only want to deal in cash because of this. And so with that, we don't know what's going to happen. There's a huge unknown. And when you have the fear of the unknown and you don't know what's going to happen and what's really going on, that's when people are really scared. And it actually says it in this article. All of it's outlined very well in this article right here. The next huge negative of collecting in vintage in 2023 is carded. If you're buying sealed in the package, actual vintage, we're not talking about sealed in the package Origins, which I think this is a picture of Origins, by the way. But if you're buying sealed stuff, then it is astronomically more expensive than it was in 2019. And to tell you the truth, it's so expensive to buy sealed in the package that I avoid it at all costs. The only time I ever buy it is if there's that rare opportunity that a loose one that's complete costs about the same as a sealed one. I'd rather go for a minty fresh sealed one. But 99.99999% of the time, a complete loose one could be $30 for a figure, but it could be $300 to $500 sealed. And to me, it's not worth it. It's not worth it at all. So I'd rather go with the retro style like these than getting an original for an astronomical amount. And that's just the way I am. Other people, you do you collect for you. And if you want to pay $1,000 a figure, go right ahead. If that's what makes you happy, you got to do what makes you happy. Spending $1,000 on a figure, for me, I would regret it till the day I die, I bet. But I've never spent $1,000 on a figure. But anyway, looking at all this stuff here, I'm looking at these thinking, okay, I remember when I was buying these for about $30 a piece, $50 a piece. Not whatever, $300, $500 that they go for now. One last quick point on this. Oddly enough, a lot of people have bought sealed figures, paid the crazy premium, and opened them so they can have a mint example of their figure. I find that insane, but again, it goes back to collect how you want. And the next thing here, this is kind of killing the hobby here, AFA rating figures. Now, this is debatable on every aspect or every end of this, but AFA rating of figures, you take a figure that's not normally worth $30, maybe even $100, you AFA rate them, and then all of a sudden you need $500 out of a figure. It's insane, in my opinion. Now, there's people out there that won't buy anything vintage unless it's AFA rated, and so that's their preference, and that's their choice. But my biggest problem with AFA, and I've had this discussion in another video, is that once you've AFA rated it, and you put that money, that $50 into AFA rating a figure, and then now you've taken a $30 figure to what you want $300 for it, you're taking it out of the market for 90% of collectors. So you've wiped 90%, availability to 90% of it off there, because people live on a budget and nobody really wants to invest $6,000 into a collection of stuff that should only cost a few hundred. So with that, I am firmly against AFA rating anything, but I do have a lot of stuff in my collection that was pre-AFA rated that I don't have to pay that AFA tax. So anyway, collecting in 2023 can be fun. Collecting vintage in 2023 can be a whole lot of fun. There's a lot of really cool stuff out there to still collect. You're able to get some common stuff for a better price. For the most part, you can get back what you had in your childhood for a relatively affordable amount compared to previous years. And availability is kind of hit and miss, and sometimes you can get the stuff you're looking for, and sometimes it takes a while, but it's still fun, and the thrill of the hunt is there, though you gotta hunt vintage stuff. It's not going to fall in your lap. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Are you seeing all of these, or do you think I'm completely wrong? Leave that comment too. Todd Ringer out.